Okay.
Well, I think everybody that said they were able to make it is here if you want to get started.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, first and foremost, thanks for having me. Been kind of talking with Sarah. I'm really excited to kind of get to know everybody as part of the Young Professionals group. So those that don't know me, I'm Nick Chaussee with Sterling CRE Advisors. And we're going to give you kind of a quick little update on the commercial real estate market here in Missoula and kind of the trends that we're seeing throughout the state. So see if I can figure out how to work the tech here. I'm not the most tech savvy. Well, let me go back here. Yeah, so at Sterling, we're unique in that we collect independent data across the state, and we take this information and use it to help our clients make informed decisions with their commercial real estate investments, which we're pretty unique in that sense. So, but we don't, it's kind of two-faced, right? We don't want to extend this data out there that reveals potential issues in the community without really considering some solutions that might be viable. So that data and the solutions that we're talking about are here, are what I'm here to talk about with you guys. And again, I don't often get to talk with my peer group about commercial real estate. Most of them think I'm, you know, some dork that works in an office and looks at buildings all day, which is true, but being able to speak with you guys, I'm really excited to hear your feedback. So please feel free to jump in if you have a question or what have you, and we'll tie in our texting system here if you guys want to be anonymous. Oh, let's go back here. So yeah, if you have your phones and you prefer to kind of stay anonymous, if you want to text Sterling CREA 020 to 22333, it should bring up a code, and we'll be able to kind of pull that data as a poll.
That was really fast. Can you say that slower?
Yeah, can you see it on the screen here? I'm on the right one.
Oh, see, I have, okay, there we go. Got it.
Yeah, sorry about that. So you can show what that looks like too. Yeah, so this is, here's a, it'll pop up on something like this, and you'll text it in, and then you'll be able to answer A, B, C, D as we kind of go through this. So to kick off, what would you rather see Missoula get? A Whole Foods, or B, a Trader Joe's? Me personally, I'm a little bit biased. A lot of my family's in Washington, and so every time I go back, I'm always hitting up Trader Joe's to pick up the goods. So, so that I can see the. It'll just populate. Okay. So it looks like we're so far Trader Joe's is winning.
I hope one of these questions is for Chick-fil-A.
No, but we'll make a note of that one. We're trying to get a Chick-fil-A.
Can you tell me the Sterling CRD to text again? Sorry, I can't get to that page yet.
If you text Sterling, STERLING, CREA 020 you text them to 22333. It should populate on your phone and connect you to what we got going here.
Okay. STERLING CREA 020.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And you know, in a smaller group like this too, if you guys just kind of want to throw out your answers, it's, you know, usually we try and do that with bigger groups, but
Trader Joe's all the way.
Trader Joe's. So yeah, how do I can't get it on the screen to see what the percentage is. Okay. So yeah, it looks like Trader Joe's is the winner. So pre-pandemic, Montana had been slowly garnering interest from national tenants. We definitely saw an increase in inquiries from major out-of-state businesses. And the pandemic really just kind of sped this up. One outcome, obviously, with increasing people and businesses moving to Montana, is the strength of the industrial market. So the industrial market is comprised of really two things. One is self-storage. So I'm sure most of us have used a storage unit at some point in our lives. That's one big component. Right now, pretty much every self-storage unit in the state of Montana is full, like full. We don't have enough, and part of that's, you know, people moving in, needing to store their stuff. as households maybe condense from whatever economic reason throughout the pandemic, people are needing to put their stuff into storage. The second component to that is distribution networks or distribution networks. Before the pandemic forced a lot of people to go online for commerce. I mean, obviously it was picking up as a trend anyways. The nationwide and global distribution networks are already kind of branching out into places like Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, that sort of thing. And especially they're focusing on the last mile distribution. So it's pretty easy to get stuff to the state, but getting it to, from Missoula distribution center to your house, or, if you live in Darby, that sort of thing, is where really the big delays come. So yeah, if you live in a major metropolitan, Seattle, LA, something like that, you can get same day shipping from Amazon. I think they do like groceries and that sort of thing as well. But say you live in Darby, that last stretch coming into Montana is what takes the most time. So to combat this, more warehouses are getting snapped up and are creating shorter last mile delivery times. One example here is that, Big Sky Fulfillment. They are a local company that does last mile distribution and just distribution for companies that do subscription boxes and that sort of thing and different food items. They recently expanded to just over 60,000 square feet out at the Bonner Mill, and they came from about 18. So they've pretty much tripled in size throughout the pandemic, which is really exciting to see. So office, obviously, I know we all of us work in an office, and it's had a pretty rough year. Many of the office buildings are partially vacated or mostly vacated. This trend is starting to reverse slightly, but it's slow going as businesses try to get folks back into the office and kind of figure out what that structure looks like to keep everybody safe. With that being said, though, it seems like the demand for larger offices is increasing as companies are trying to kind of work through what that solution looks like for them, whether that's creating a safer space or giving people bigger single individual offices and the like. It's kind of been interesting to track, rather. So I'll be curious to see, we don't have a question for this, but if you guys want to maybe speak up on what your guys' office situation looks like for you. I've heard a couple different things, so I'm kind of curious.
My team's pretty small, so we're all in the office.
Right.
Yeah, there's only 3 of us here in Missoula, so.
Okay. And do you have are they, individual offices then, or is it kind of a big open space, open style?
Kind of big open space. So it'll be interesting to see, though, like you're talking about, there's been this big push over the past decade for co-working spaces and,
Exactly, yeah.
what this all means for that.
Mm-hmm. And just, I guess, for reference too, so our office, we are in essentially kind of like a co-working space. I mean, there's 12 or 14 individual offices. Sterling takes about half of them. And then the rest are leased out to single users or kind of freelancers, that sort of thing. But again, we don't have any open space really. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to hear that you guys are something similar. So yeah, is there anybody else that wants to chime in on what their office situation is looking like?
Yeah, I work at Hub Insurance, and we probably 3 years ago maybe doubled the size of our office space. So they constructed we're in the complex kind of behind Home Depot. So they bought the lot next to our building and then basically built the same thing, just flipped it and opened up the wall. And we're planning on doing a lot of hiring, but now with the pandemic and people working from home, they're because so it's been interesting.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think, similar businesses have been kind of planning that too. So it's interesting to see how it'll shake out. Sorry, Brandon, I think you got cut off there. I don't know if you were trying to.
Basically just we have a lot of empty space that we're kind of like, well, do we even need this now? Like, what's going to happen? Because I'm in my office today, but I'm home. Like a lot of us have kids, so we work from home certain days of the week and leave early and things like that. So we don't really need as much space as we have because we're not all here. I mean, there's probably 25% of us physically in the office at any given day. So interesting.
Yeah, and I've also heard of some businesses, I think ATG is one, well, I think they're still remote, but trying to phase in kind of a rotation where you keep certain people that are working together, you know, they'll be in 2 or 3 days a week and then take 2 weeks off and then come back kind of thing. So yeah, really curious to see how that's going to shake out. So
Yeah.
So yeah, retail, I mean, retail face similar challenges too. Though we're seeing companies, a lot of them are forging ahead with what they had planned. So they're either continuing to break ground or breaking ground or continuing with construction projects that they had already started pre-pandemic. So restaurants, grocery stores, even some hotels are kind of moving forward regardless, which is good to see. So lastly, we kind of come to multifamily. So Sterling only deals with commercial assets, obviously, and that does include multifamily properties, so 5 or more units. No, we don't do anything residential. So because housing is such a tough topic, and because we just finished compiling a lot of the data for the year end Q4 2020, I'll kind of focus on that a little bit throughout the rest of the presentation. But right now, multifamily is crazy. It's overheated. There's not enough demand, there's crazy demand and not enough supply, and we just can't seem to build enough. So after that quick little rundown, what's your kind of take on how development is heading? Is it going the right direction rather for Missoula? And this is another poll. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I feel like, so I'm on my phone, so sorry, I'm not participating in the poll.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like I said, it's a small group, so.
Yeah, so I'm a single parent I just have one child, and I have a pretty good job, but what I'm facing is, you know, I don't want to live in the multifamily. I want to live in, you know, a single family home, but a price range for someone like myself with just one income and to find something that I actually want to live in and raise a child in, that's kind of the area, like the, you know, high 200s, low 300s is sort of my price range that I feel comfortable with buying, but that area is just not available at all.
Yeah, we'll kind of dive in on what the numbers look like on how the spreads kind of what's causing or why your rents are going up and that sort of thing. But yeah, I've got quite a few friends that are in a similar situation and there's just not the inventory. Again, we don't deal with residential stuff, so I'm not super keen on it or up to date, but the people that I've been talking to, I think there's something like 60 houses on the market right now, and 40 of them or something like that, 2/3 of them are under $1 million. So
yeah,
going up and inventory is just not there.
The one good thing is permitting is up for single family.
Yeah, that is true. Sarah just reminded me that permitting is up for single family homes. So hopefully we bring some stuff to market that's a little bit more affordable for the Missoula whole. So
yeah, it seems like as the multifamilies are going up though, like I see, you know, new complexes going in little pocket areas all over town. It seems like they're filling up pretty quick. They
are. So, and we'll kind of dive into what vacancies looking like for multifamily as a whole a little bit farther down here.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, they're going really quickly. So yeah, I would agree with kind of the consensus here. That seems like we're somewhat on the right track. You know, I think there's some hurdles that we need to get over to bring us back into the range we need to be. But yeah, I agree with you guys. So this chart here leads to the vacancy. So starting out Q1 2020, we were at 3.63% vacancy, which is a pretty healthy vacancy rate. I mean, that's kind of in that 4 to 5 range is where we want to be. So 3.5 is pretty good. It dipped up a little bit. But the crazy thing is here is if you look at Q3 and Q4, we went from 1.2% to sub 1% vacancy. So we're talking, I think there's right around 6,000 market rate rental units in Missoula. And, you know, like 60 of them are available right now, which is just insane. Also, when you have supply decreasing, rents are going to go up. So as a whole, we've seen rents rise about 5.5% this year. On one hand, this is great if you own the multifamily building, the apartment building. But on the other hand, if you're looking to rent, it's going to, it's going to hurt your wallet. So, but yeah, for the community, we really need to kind of work towards a more stable housing market, and to be sure we're not pricing out, Missoula entirely, which is kind of a big concern right now. And again, yeah, low vacancy and high rents isn't really a surprise. And the for sale market too is really slim right now. So, okay, this is also a pretty interesting chart. So so this is year over year. The dark blue is Q4, 2019, and the blue is Q4 2020. So you can see, I mean, this is the breakdown for studios, 1 bed, 2 bed, 3 bed. We had a lot more supply in 2019, obviously. And then again, if you look towards Q4 2020, and that spread it went from $1,100 a month for 3 bed, 2 bath to almost 1,800, and that's just a matter of the economics at this point, which is tough.
So all of the new units that are coming online in 2021, what is that going to do to the vacancy rate?
So kind of artificially, it's going to raise it, right? It'll take, it's always a retrospective thing. So it'll take a quarter or two to kind of stabilize and see what the true vacancy rate is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if we add, 600 units or something like that, it's definitely going to raise the vacancy. Raise it. But it'll take a quarter or so to stabilize. So I think the demand's there, that they're going to get leased up really quickly, kind of like we were talking about. And so we're going to need more. I mean, I think ultimately we need right around 700 units a year to kind of keep up with what historically Missoula's growth rate was. And with permitting and stuff, I mean, things are in the pipeline for that to happen. But then you're starting to factor in other outside aspects like construction costs are way up right now too. And that's going to, transfer down into the rents for the market.
Are most of the apartments coming online, are they all market rate, or is there any, what's the percentage of low income?
That's a good question. So most of them are, a large percentage of them are. I would say probably arbitrarily, I can go back and look, probably 10 to 15% are low income. As a side note, I'm work with Habitat on the land acquisition committee, and we're kind of working through that right now on how we can get creative to create more affordable housing. I know Habitat's goal is 30 units or 30 houses a year by 2030, which is a pretty steep increase. There's some things that we're looking at doing with land trusts and that sort of thing to kind of keep housing permanently affordable.
Are developers incentivized or required to make low income part of their projects?
No, that's another great question. They're not really. So there's a couple levers that you can pull on, whether it's tax incentive, or it's either taxes or density bonuses. Mm-hmm. And so again, that's one of those things that on my end with Habitat and my participation there, we're trying to figure out a way to incentivize those developers to build maybe 10% of what their development is as affordable, or something that we can kind of keep the supply up. But no,
the city doesn't require it.
Not at this time, no.
Okay.
And again, yeah, so there's some things in the works for legislation that should kind of help developers get through permitting and that sort of thing faster, and so they could feasibly do that. But no, the city doesn't really require it. You're going to look towards like Homeward or somebody like that, that's going to be building primarily most of the affordable units. So, mm-hmm. I mean, I'm pretty sure they have a pretty substantial property coming online here, hopefully end of 21. So,
Nick, the data that's in this slide, mm-hmm. is this all multifamily, or does it include single family homes or spaces of it?
Oh, as far as rentals?
Yeah, like, does it include, you know, private rentals, or is it mostly like apartment complexes and things like that? Places
Yeah,
like
so
that.
just from a supplies point of view, it's primarily multifamily, but we do look at, you know, different unit mixes, whether it's if it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bed house, we'll factor that rent in. Obviously, you know, single family residences kind of historically are going to be more expensive just because they're standalone and that sort of thing. But yeah, it does kind of factor in by breaking it down by how, bed and bath type. So it does consider that.
And you might have
That's
touched
why I
on.
was wondering. Oh, I was just going to say, that's why I was wondering, because if you're including those and you're averaging the prices, I could understand why it was so high. But I guess I'm just really surprised by $1,800 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, and
Right.
part of that.
No, I was just gonna. You might have touched on this. What's the median income for Missoula right now? If the median's at 1,800 for rent, like, what's the percentage of low income to? I mean, who's qualifying? How many people aren't qualifying? I guess.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do have that data, and I can, if you want to drop me an email or something, we can send that to you directly. And if you guys, the rest of the group's interested too, we can send you that. So.
It's sorry, I was just gonna say, this is Sarah. So I'm Sterling's marketing director. We actually, so all of the data that this presentation is based off of is pulled into a report we'll send to everybody. But those are great questions. So thinking of median income and then how many people in Missoula fit that, I think we have maybe, yeah, there's like 3 paragraphs that we go into covering all of that, because it's A, the definitions are changing, and B, the demographics in Missoula are changing. So we'd love to send that to you. And then if you have follow-up questions, you can always ask us, but we'll send you that whole report after this too. It is very interesting. And yeah, we go into all of that, but we'll send it out.
Definitely. All right, we'll continue on here. So one of the biggest opportunities that we have to working towards a solution with multifamily, and one that is sorely needed, is the larger apartments, right? So it used to be that only 1/3 of the households nationally were 3 or more renters. Now it's up close to 42%. And we've seen, you know, we're trying to realize that increase and bring that supply that's needed. But with that being said, it's really difficult to find the capital to build an apartment complex of 3-bedroom units. There are a couple ways for people in our demographic to kind of start investing in multifamily, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit. But the main reason that there isn't that 3-bedroom supply and why it's so expensive is it costs way more to build a 3-bed. It wouldn't seem like it, but you know, when you look at a typical, say, 70-unit development, probably 60 to 70% of it's going to be 2 beds. And then the next largest percentage is going to be studios or 1-beds. And then there'll be maybe 10% that are 3-bedroom units. So as I kind of touched on it, and maybe you guys have some interest in this too, how, you know, people in our position in our, you know, our peer group, how do we get into investing in multifamily potentially? There's a traditional way, which is called house hacking. So maybe you find a 4-plex or something that you can buy one under 5 units. You can buy it, live in one. You can qualify for conventional financing, and as you build equity with principal pay down, and you know, your renters are supplementing that, you can kind of keep roll the ball and acquire more units. And again, 5 is a magic number here because you can qualify for conventional financing there. And once you have that principal pay down, you can refinance and hopefully buy another one or buy a single family home or something like that and use that income to help qualify you. But obviously talk with your lender. Eventually though, you kind of get to this point where if you choose a house hacking route and you start with a 4-plex or a duplex or something, and you've kind of rolled that into a couple of different projects, once you kind of hit the 10 to 12 unit threshold, you generally have to make a decision on whether you'd rather have 4, just for example, 3 4-plexes with more expensive management, or kind of a single, maybe 12-unit apartment building that usually has cheaper management because everything's consolidated and they're not, you know, you don't have 3 roofs, you have 1 roof and that sort of thing. And ultimately, I would advise you to try and consolidate as much as possible. So the second kind of avenue that you'd have to get into investing in multifamily or commercial investments is micro investment. So this is kind of a new concept that we are trying to implement, and you know, I think there's somebody here with WealthPack, right? Or maybe they're not on this call, but historically, commercial real estate affords investors the opportunity to, you know, on the development side, to realize a lot greater returns than maybe the stock market. And it's, you know, there's a hedge against inflation, and it's usually not going to see as big a dips and swings as the stock market can. It totally can, and please don't take that as, you know, as the gospel or whatever. But CRE investments, you know, you can still lose a substantial amount of money. And for that reason, the SEC has very stringent rules that keep commercial real estate companies from crowdfunding with smaller investors. So if you're not an accredited investor, you're out of luck in most cases. And that keeps you from maybe realizing those larger returns. So now the SEC has relaxed the rules a little bit and made it simpler for smaller scale investors to put money in commercial real estate and start kind of building their portfolio. And this includes, you know, different diversified real estate investments. So a couple companies are using a model where that's kind of seen in bigger metros where, say you live in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in a building, right? And usually you're a renter and you don't have any return from the money that you're putting out. Well, this micro investment kind of takes that and creates an equity stake for the renter. So you'd essentially kind of buy into the property as itself. And it goes into a lot more detail, but the gist of it is that you're going to realize some of those gains as a part owner in the building with an equity stake. So that's kind of the trend for micro investments and what we're trying to maybe bring to market here in Missoula. You know, it'll afford, you're not going to realize the appreciation like you would on a single family house, hopefully, especially or ideally, but you are getting some return as a renter, which is otherwise you wouldn't. So that's kind of investing. Sorry.
Would micro investing, so are you talking about an alternative to a REIT? Like you have to be an accredited investor to qualify to purchase a REIT? Is that kind of
yeah. Yeah. So the SEC says I can't go out to and crowdfund for say I have a 80-unit apartment building I want to develop. I can't go out and crowdfund and take your money and put into development unless you're an accredited investor.
Sure.
Oh, you know, make over $250,000 a year, or you have over $1 million in assets. And they put that in place because I think you know, people were getting taken advantage of, obviously. And so now you're able to structure it a little bit differently where you don't have to essentially be an accredited investor. So,
okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's really interesting because I worked in wealth management for a little while and we always had clients that wanted to get into REITs, but they weren't an accredited investor. So this is just a really interesting kind of like side hack for that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I would say
cool.
Yeah, and Sarah just put a bug in my ear too. We haven't tested this yet, and I guess part of kind of presenting on this would be to get your guys' kind of sentiment on where you think or how you think that'd be received to the market. The caveat with this though is it doesn't really solve the inventory problem. With higher density housing that's currently going up around the city, as well as the Mullen area expansion and the relaxed ADU requirements, we're hoping to see that turnaround, but this is more kind of from an investment standpoint. It doesn't really solve the supply issue that we have. So, I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' feedback on what you think kind of on what I've spoke about so far on this.
Yeah, micro investing is, I think it would be a bit of an incentive for someone that wouldn't normally want, how do I put this? Like someone that would look more to purchase real estate, but maybe they hold off on purchasing because they aren't quite ready, or, you know, and then they would get into more of a multifamily unit, but then they're getting some sort of an investment return on it for
Mhm.
living there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that that would be a good way to, you know, kind of raise more capital, I guess, to expand on those developments if you have people going in that way.
And the interesting thing here too is that if a renter's in this position where they have some sort of a stake in the building, they're gonna hopefully they're gonna have some sort of like pride and ownership, right? So they're gonna maintain their unit as best they can because they, you know, they want the property to perform for them ultimately. So.
And you'd probably also have less renter turnover that way too. People would stay in their particular unit longer. So
Yeah.
it's less, and it's less, you know, dealing with deposits and cleaning and all that stuff too, which probably adds up over time.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Can you ask about their perception of higher density housing? I just want to get like,
Yeah, that's a good question too.
Yeah.
So as kind of Missoula's relaxing a little bit on density with the Molinary plan and that sort of thing, and relaxed ADU requirements, what is your guys' kind of sentiment on higher density in Missoula and kind of like those infill locations?
I don't know. I personally kind of struggle with it, and the reason I say that is I've got, you know, 3 little kids. We moved to Missoula for that exact opposite reason, I guess, is that kind of big city feel with the small town vibe. I don't know. Personally, that's, yeah, I struggle a little bit with the high density for the reasons, you know, the further they get to, you know, your single family homes.
Yeah.
You know, not all the time, but statistically, like you get more crime, you get more, just all those things that go along with higher density.
Right. No, yeah, I appreciate the feedback.
Dan, you moved like away from, so Dan was in Pleasant View and moved out further out on Mullen. So it's like Pleasant View, I don't know what they're considered for high density, but it just feels like people keep moving out further. But even living, you know, where Dan lives, it feels like it's even filling up out there. So it just seems like, and I live in the Hellgate Elementary area as well. And it just feels like so much is getting packed in. And yeah, like he said, the crime rate's increasing. Like I lived in my same place for 8 years, and the homeless population has like drastically increased. And then with the bus system being free, and then the more, you know, kind of apartments that come in, they put more bus stops around, and it just has way more foot traffic, it seems. So I don't know, Dan, maybe you could speak on kind of like what made you move from somewhere like Pleasant View to further out of town and stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, my wife and I bought in Pleasant View 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago. When we lived there, there was like 14 little kids running around. We had 1 little guy. Then now we have 3 kids. We kind of outgrew our home, but at the same time, we didn't have to move. It wasn't something that we had to do, but there's a huge just that influx of those buildings that went in the last like 3 or 4 years, as well as the new development going in at the Flynn right there on the lane. But just to see the influx of people that have moved in, there were no more families. My family was the only one left on the street. Out of like 14 houses, mine was the very last one. There wasn't, the people that moved in started becoming either retirees or 23 to 30-year-olds. You know, their parents were buying houses and they're renting them. And it just, we had 2 high-speed chases, believe it or not. I caught them on my Vivint video cam, one with like 11 cops at like 11 o'clock at night, the other a motorcycle at like 4:30 in the afternoon, and kids and parents were scrambling and we were pulling kids literally off the street. It was kind of wild. And that was kind of the tipping point for us is, you know, it's that the more people you pack in, the more opportunity you have for just the wildness, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously as a, as a father, those are valid concerns. And yeah, no, you're not wrong. I think ultimately, there's that density, you need more density to kind of fulfill the demand that's there. You know,
Can I
Yeah,
I
go
ask?
ahead.
Okay, so now that I've got you guys on the phone, this is a really interesting conversation. What are your thoughts on the ADU requirements being relaxed? Is that something that you
Yeah.
see? I mean, we oftentimes people act like it's a silver bullet when we talk about development, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. But is that something that you're welcoming to your neighborhoods, or is it something that you struggle with as well?
So when you say ADU requirements lifted, as in you can add more units?
Sorry.
Is that
Yeah, that's not very clear. So ADUs are additional or accessory dwelling units. It kind of, the definition depends on your location, but they're basically like if you have on your property what's called like a mother-in-law unit. Yeah, so it's an additional dwelling unit, and my family lived on the north side for a long time before we moved, and those are super popular over there. Some people Airbnb them, and some people just rent them out. But I'm wondering, I mean, the city is often talking about how ADUs can help ease our rental issue, which we've just talked about is obviously reaching kind of peak crisis levels when you think about there not being any units really available for people. So I'm wondering if ADUs are something that you see in your neighborhood and if you view them as negative or positive.
Yeah, this is so funny. So right out my window here is, I think it's called Hellgate Meadows.
Yep.
And they have those. So they have the cute little house with the yard that, the homeowner lives in. And then they have the apartments above the garage. And I have a friend who just moved to Bozeman for work, and he lives in one of those too. And his friends purchased this place, and his apartment that he's living in is helping them afford for their family to live in this beautiful home to raise their family in. And then he lives up there, but he parks in back. His doorway comes, from the alley to go inside. So it doesn't really impact, their day-to-day lives much. But I personally love that idea, and I would feel totally comfortable living in a neighborhood that has those, more so than having a large, like Mullen and Reserve apartment complex or something like that. I personally think it gives an opportunity for a homeowner to have that extra income to help them afford a home that they want to raise a family in. But also it gives more of a quiet rental for the tenant as well.
I'm curious if the the requirements are being relaxed. I guess, is it being modeled after another state that's done this, and what have the results been?
That's a good question. I don't know if they're modeling necessarily. I think that they're updating based on community input. We followed the process so far, and it seems like it's interesting, the debate, right? There's a certain amount of people who think if these turn into rentals, then we're just going to have parties in our neighborhood. Which, sorry, I didn't catch your name here, but who is it?
Kelsey.
Kelsey.
Yeah.
Kelsey, like you, I lived right next to somebody that had one of these, and they were great neighbors, and we never had any issues like with the ADU component. But I do think that the city's been working through an extensive process on this, and it's mainly, I would say it's mainly public driven, but I actually have on my list today to reach out and kind of see where we're at on that. So I can ask if it's being modeled after another city and let you know. I think it's an interesting question.
I mean, I'm just curious if it may not be a new idea, and certainly other communities have maybe developed this approach and what the results have been. I mean, I definitely think Missoula is a community that has a lot of population, specifically with college students, that would be perfect for this type of model. So, yeah, I don't know if I have an opinion. I'm interested, and I think even if you didn't have like something already built, tiny homes are hugely popular, and you could put one on your property potentially. And again, that's just an extra piece of income that makes development and housing affordable for medium income people, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm curious what the results have been other places, and if it can be compared, and maybe if there are people who are opposed to it, if that information would help sway them to the other side.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. It's definitely locally driven. We were looking at the ordinances across Montana for a project, and is it Great Falls? You can't have ADUs at
I
all.
believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and then I mean the requirements are pretty stringent too. I think Missoula, it has to be more than 350 square feet, but it can't be. It has to be more than 350, but it can't be anything above 600. So yeah, it's definitely. I think there's tight rein on it, but there's another city in Montana where it's like you could throw like a box car and retrofit that and use it too. So it's a little like in Montana. I don't think that Montana has a good model for it yet, and Missoula has the opportunity to do that too.
It seems like a really big up and coming concept in Bozeman. Like this neighborhood that I'm talking about, it's the whole thing. So it's probably a Pleasant View size development. I don't remember what it's called. But almost all of the units, and they're really, really nice homes, but almost all of them have these above their garage. And so it'd be really interesting to see like where Missoula is compared to them in terms of, what's allowed and how it's working and things.
Yeah, we have, I think we might have an article on that, so I can send that out to you guys as well. Just with a caveat that I think that was written a couple months ago. So obviously policy and ordinances changed. I had one other quick question. I know that we're at time. It's so interesting to talk to this group. Like Nick said, we don't really get to talk to our peer group very often. And when we think about, higher density housing has been identified as one way to combat these issues. And I hear you. We moved from the north side out to, we live in the county now. It's like, 25 minutes for me to get to work, but that trade-off was worth it to us because we moved further out of town. But higher density, obviously we have a housing issue, and higher density has been identified as one optimal way to fight that. And I'm wondering if there's a location in your mind that would suit that higher density need that we have.
I don't want any more going in on Mullen myself. It just seems like it's been the answer for so long, and they just keep packing more and more in. I realize it's a really convenient area with all the, big box stores, and it's somewhat central to town. But it just seems like, maybe more on the south side, or it seems like there's some space that some stuff could go in on the north side, and maybe just, I don't know. This is just my opinion, but
isn't that intersection like the most dangerous in the city because of how many people pass through it every day? The Mullen and Broadway intersection.
It's actually,
I think it has like
a state.
Yeah. That's a result of having that many people out there all the time.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too. We've certainly represented commercial properties that have sold on Mullen, and so we're certainly not like, saying that we don't think that this is a good area for development. But I do think, to your point, there's other places in the city, and the north side is a great point. That site where the city, where it was, a former, Scott Street. That's an excellent place. To your point, there's a lot of infill opportunity. So we can't look to Mullen and be like, this is it. This is going to solve all of our problems. And that's kind of what we're wondering, is where these places where people should be considering more carefully.
And also the north side is so up and coming right now. People are excited. I have tons of friends who have bought houses and fixed them up over there, and there's Draftworks Brewery over there. And it just seems like, places like that would be a great place to start thinking about putting in some of these units and maybe clean out some of the trailers. I know, again, that's hitting on kind of the low income, people might need that space because that's what they can afford, but putting in something that's new and clean and fresh and cleaning up the area, but also just kind of like spreading out and allowing people to afford places in different areas of town rather than just right here. There's
and actually, so there's two there's two opportunities that I think are really important. I know the North Missoula Development Corporation is having a public meeting on the 27th of this month, specifically talking about balancing new builds with gentrification and how that impacts folks that are lower income. And I think they do a good job of including all of those voices, because truthfully, when you start to get into these developments, there's so many factors at play for how things can be developed and who's being displaced and what, I mean, the considerations are really a long list. So that's the first one. The Northside Development Corporation, or the North Missoula Development Corporation. And then the other one is the Mullen Build Grants, which I know that we're renaming it. I just can't pronounce the other name. I'm working on it. But there's the build grant process. That public process is also, we've been involved in that. And so just making sure when you, I think also coming up and saying like, you know, these are our experiences in these areas and it's getting more dangerous and we need certain things, whether that be for safety or different amenities. I think it's really important that people voice those, because it's really like, this is the crucial time when all of that is going in and being planned.
Isn't the build grant supposed to connect like two main roads out there, and that's supposed to relieve some of the pressure at that specific intersection?
Yeah, so
Flynn Road or something?
yeah, Mary Jane Boulevard will be going in, and that'll connect from Broadway over to Mullen. So it'll relieve a lot of the traffic through Flynn and coincidentally Pleasant View and all that. So
And
Some friends selling their house on Mary Jane because they don't want to live right on the corner there when that goes out. Have you guys heard any feedback on that?
as far as timing or?
No, so some of the residents that have lived there for so long, they're used to, you know, kind of the quietness of the neighborhood. And so one of my good friends in particular, she lives literally right on the corner of Mary Jane, and her neighbors, you know, across the street and next door have sold their homes in the last few years because they know this is coming, and they just feel like it won't be as kind of neighborhood friendly, kid friendly, things like that because of the traffic. But I mean, do you think it's going to be as busy like a Mullen Road, or will it just be more kind of side traffic?
This is okay. So this is actually a great example of all the considerations that go into large scale development. So I know MDT has traffic. I mean, they do traffic studies, right, that predict what that's going to look like in the future. The Missoula Planning Organization has the same thing. And then if you look at the Mullen Area Build Plan and the Mullen Area Master Plan, so there's all these considerations and all these factors that are basically whittling down decisions that the city makes as far as what developers can do. But to your point, it's also a huge amount of data when they start developing these large plats of land. It's a lot of data to look into, and that's why we just try to make sure that we're part of those conversations, even if we don't have input. Just knowing what's happening next is really important. So unfortunately, we don't have any answers. I know that we're getting to time, so we don't want to like leave you guys hanging with no answers here. These are basically, like Nick said when we started, we put this information out and we'll send it to you, but we don't want to come out and say like, oh, there's no vacancy, and then not have any thoughts on how to improve that situation.
Yeah, I think we can probably. So is there any kind of residual questions that you guys had with anything we talked about so far?
Hey, Vanjie, can you send out the video? I got stuck with a client. I really wanted to talk with you guys about this. I was probably one most interested, and I had a client walk in on me.
Oh, no worries.
So
yeah, absolutely. I've recorded, and they've also shared that they're going to send, I'm not sure what, not this presentation, but a different report, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Lance too, if there's any specific questions that you had going into this that you want hopefully to talk about, you can send me an email, or happy to kind of talk to you on the phone about it too. So
yeah, I'm more interested in the kind of the viewpoint and traction you guys are trying to take and make. Is what I was really interested in. I sorry I missed it. So I kind of want to listen to the presentation, then I'm probably go from there for questions. Because I mean, we do developments, everything else, and that's a big thing on housing and everything else. That's really interesting the take you guys have compared to like a builder or a mainstream financial institution. So
Right.
And it's the other part about this is it's not just challenging for the city. It's not just challenging for individual renters. I really think this is something that the community does need to come together on. And it's, there's difficult decisions that have to be made. And so we don't want to act like, oh, it's great and investors are going to come in and everything's going to be sunshine and roses. Like, we want to be able to have a conversation and a difficult conversation about what development looks like, because when we speak to developers, not just locally, but I'm sure you work with folks that are national, we want to give them a clear picture of what Missoula is like. I think we are unique.
Yeah, I think there's the uniqueness of it, and then there's also I'm guessing you talked a little bit about like city regulations, how that's created new developments of all that, and then also how Missoula doesn't have the financial backing a lot of times to do what Missoula needs for that infrastructure and what that looks like. And that's why I wanted to hear a lot about kind of where you guys are coming from a lot more.
Yeah, well, let's set up a time we maybe chat on the phone or something about it.
Yeah, I want to listen to the presentations, have an idea, and then kind of go from there for sure then.
Well,
thank you guys so much for your time.
Really appreciate it. And I'd love to kind of maybe participate in the future in the young professionals. So yeah, we'll get some details out to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email or give me a call. Happy to kind of give you our take on it all. So yeah, thanks again, guys. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks. Bye.